Do a final mix at the end. The order of this is helpful because if we do songwriting and production and arrangement first, then we can do mixing afterwards because we have all the parts of our song. Devote an actual session to your mixdown. Mixing as you go is totally fine, but devoting an actual session to only mixing will really help you practice the mixing stage as well as train your ear. Clean up your project before you start mixing. This means deleting any unused tracks, deleting any bypass plugins, and grouping anything that needs to be grouped as well. Color code and organize your project. So color coding will actually help you visualize the parts of your song. For me, my bass is always orange, and once it looks good, then we can make it sound good, right? Save your track as a new project when you go into the mixdown. This will help you recover any lousy decisions you might make later. Trust me, you'll thank yourself. Use a Premix Reference. So if you bounce out your track before it's mixed and then pull it back into your project, you can actually compare the before and after of any mixing decisions you make sure you're making actually good ones. Use multiple Premix references. I personally use a Premix reference for the low end, one for the drums, and then one for the whole track as well. Use an external reference track. This will help guide you make your mixing decisions based on a professional track that you know and trust. Make sure you level match it and turn it off, and then try and match up the arrangement as well, and then you can flick back and forth by hitting the solo button. Know the frequency spectrum. It's really useful to know the roles of different frequencies in your track. We have an EQ cheat sheet which is designed to help you with exactly this, so go grab it in the description below. Set up some mono and side switches. Throughout your mixdown, it's good to get in the habit of testing the mono and sides capability of your track. Particularly dance music needs to sound good in mono. Key commands will make your life easier. In most DAWs, you can set up your own hotkeys as well. You can do this in Ableton by hitting Command K, and check out how I've mapped my reference solo switches to the numbers 1, 2, and 3 on my keyboard, and I've also mapped these mono and side switches to the numbers 8 and 9, so I can change between them really easily at the click of a button, right? Start with a fader only mix. I recommend pulling all the faders down and then bringing them up one by one. Spend some time on your fader only mix to get the relationships between elements right from the get-go. Start your fader mix with your most important element. Maybe that's the kick drum, maybe that's the bass, maybe that's a vocal, and then bring in the second most important element, and then bring in the supporting elements after that. Set your fader levels by bringing them up slowly. So we've got our faders at negative infinity, and as we bring them up, we can hear it get louder, and keep going until it's too loud, and then go down until it's too quiet, and then the perfect spot will be somewhere in between these 2 points. Close your eyes and listen to the decisions you're making. This will help you actually use your ears rather than just your eyes. In Ableton, you can use the 0 key, and whilst your eyes are closed, you can spam the device on and off to actually see if it's making a difference. High pass pretty much everything. Unless it's a kick or a bass, most things don't need low end, so may as well high pass it. Mix at an appropriate volume. At low volume, our ears are more sensitive to mid-range, whereas at high volumes, we can hear more bass and highs, so keep this in mind when you're mixing. Mastering won't really fix anything, so don't rely on it. If there's a problem with your track that you can't fix with mixing, then the answer is probably in the sound design or the production stage. Learn your stock tools first. It's most important to know how to use an EQ or a compressor rather than which one to use. And all EQs and compressors pretty much do the same thing, so you don't need expensive plugins to make good mixes. Consider volume automation instead of compression. So I've got this vocal here, and you can see how this phrase in here is a little bit quieter. For me to fix this, it would be much more natural if I simply just automate the gain to come up. Whereas if I use a compressor, then it's going to be really harshly compressing these louder parts and really lightly compressing this middle part. Your tools aren't the problem. Countless great tracks have been made on minimal equipment, so learn to use what you have, start making music now, and invest later. This seems obvious, but don't cover your ears when you mix. Something like wearing a beanie, please don't do this. Also, make sure you don't have anything covering or in front of your tweeters. Be creative. Even though mixing is a slightly more analytical task, we're really trying to emphasize the emotion and the characteristics from our track. So how can we get creative with processing to achieve this? A/B all of your mixing decisions as you make them. This is a great habit which will not only improve your mix itself, but it will also help train your ear. Match the output level so you can A/B properly. If you're going to add saturation or even do some really harsh EQ boosts, matching the output will make it more of a fair A/B comparison so you can actually hear the adjustment rather than just the difference in gain. If you're A/Bing something and the adjustment is insignificant, you can't hear a difference or it doesn't actually add anything to the track, then delete it and move on. Learn which plugins you like. By A/Bing them against plugins that do similar roles, you can see which one sounds better in a plugin shootout. For example, multiple different compressors doing the exact same type of compression, swapping back and forth between all of them to see which one sounds best. Don't overuse compression. It's a very easy thing to do in electronic music because compressors were actually made for leveling out natural dynamics in recording, so like a guitar recording, for example. So in reality, we just don't need as much compression in electronic music. Instead, you should know how to use compression and use it intentionally. So check out our compression cheat sheet to learn how to use compressors properly. Unnecessary EQ is a common mistake as well. For example, if you're trying to get less low end, instead of doing a low cut, maybe you could reduce the sub-bass fader instead. EQs are simply a way of changing the frequency relationship within a track. Everything is relative in mixing. For example, if you decrease the amount of low end, what you're also doing is making the mid-range and treble more present. Think of it like a scale. We need to get the right ratio of everything to achieve the balance we want. You should think of your mix as a whole track, all of the individual parts working together. We're no longer producing individual tracks, but we're listening to the interactions and cohesion between the tracks. I really enjoy mixing because it's kind of like a problem-solving puzzle. Do not copy other reference mixes. If you're looking at your reference and boosting the bass in your track because they have more bass in their track, this is a surefire way to destroy your own mix. So you still need to listen critically to your own track first. Reference tracks can help guide you in a particular direction, but your track is always going to be different. Take regular breaks. Your ears do become biased over time and a break will help recalibrate them. Add subtle white noise if you want a bit more thickness out of something. People often forget that this is a mixing thing too, and this is really easy to do in Ableton with the erosion device. If it sounds good to you, then trust your own decision and stick by it. Trusting your own decisions is a big part of mixing. Mix with context. It helps if you try and get all of the elements into your mix as soon as possible, and try to make decisions like EQ cuts whilst listening to other elements in your track. When you can, try and mute things instead of soloing. For the exact same reason, this will give you a bit more context to your mixing decisions. For example, with context, you'll probably crank an EQ way more than if it was soloed, right? Solo still has its place, of course, but at the bare minimum, you should at least check and adjust in context. Fix problems first, process afterwards. Make sure you do stuff like your correctional EQ before processing. Otherwise, you'll simply be processing the problems and they'll become emphasized. Always sleep on it. Pretty self-explanatory, but it'll give you a fresh perspective. Remember to clean up your reverb and delay tails, especially at points in your track where you want maximum contrast like a drop. Bypass things and see if it sounds better. Literally start clicking around and turning things off. This works better with processing, but if anything sounds better, then just keep it off. Turn off tracks and see if it sounds better. Most of the time it won't, but if you do mute something and it doesn't sound worse or better, then that's a sign that you might not need it after all. Mix in an order. Find an order that works best and is most logical for your track and follow it so you don't forget anything. Feel the vibe of the track. If I'm mixing a dance-oriented track and it makes me want to dance, then I know it's working right. If it doesn't, then something's wrong and you should probably have a break and come back to it. Cut the low end out of the sides. Below 100 Hz, we want our tracks to be mono, because if our low end has stereo information, our track will actually become weakened. Seek out constructive feedback on your mixdowns. Maybe that's reaching out to a friend or joining an online community. There's a lot of online resources which will help, including our own community at EDM Prod. Collaborate with others. Getting in person in the studio with another producer is single-handedly one of the best ways to learn. Of course, if you can't do this, then collaborating online is super valuable as well, but seriously, I've learned so much from collaborating with other people, so I really can't stress this enough. Listen to your mix in different scenarios. A fun one that I like to do is hit play on my mix, literally walk outside my room and listen to it from outside my room to see if anything interesting pops out. Also listen from your phone, in the car, different pairs of headphones, and so on. And the most important one of all is practice. We were all clueless once upon a time, believe it or not. We all came from somewhere, and if you keep practicing, you will get better. It's as simple as that. So there you have it. That's 50 mixing tips. If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below. If you have enjoyed the video today, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. It definitely helps us out a lot. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.